booklet is going to represent basically one day of our day in Israel.
I don't know if
The
you
first
want to do that.
Day
No.
2 is when our visit
What are
to
we gonna
Israel
do?
really starts. That's when we get there. They call it day 2 and day 3. So this month we're doing the one place where we would land on day 2, which was of course Lydda, and I talked about Joppa, and then day 3
We're
would be
up
doing
here.
Caesarea and Mount Carmel
I
and
can't
Megiddo.
figure out how to. We'd have to go this way.
And day 4 will be the stuff we study next month, November. Day 5 is the stuff we study in December, and so on like that. So what I'm doing is I'm setting them up so each month in here represents one day there. Okay, does that make sense? That way we're able to give a little more time to it. The other thing I want to mention, Kim, Harold came in and mentioned to me, I don't know if y'all heard the announcement this morning. They did a really good job of promoting the 8 o'clock program this morning. We're planning on, at this point, now understand, we may have to play with adjusting things. There are basically 3 components we're working with. One, of course,
We have to
is
go
the
over.
class. One is the traditional music, and one is the sermon. Those are the 3 things we're trying to work with. Now, what we want to do, because we think it'd be the best thing all around, is live stream the sermon so that when the preaching is going on downstairs, we're seeing the same thing in A3 at the same time. That's what we want to accomplish. We want to do that rather than playing the pre-recorded sermon that they do on Saturday night. It's just a different experience. So we want to try to do that. In order to accomplish that, the plan at this point is to start with ambassadors class at 8 o'clock, then have the traditional music starting at 9 o'clock, leading to the service, the sermon. If that doesn't work, the other way we could do it would be have the music first, then ambassadors, then the sermon. But in either case, we got to kind of schedule it so that the live stream sermon, that's the anchor point. So that's the plan. That's why this morning when they announced it, they said it's gonna be 3 components: the sermon, the music,
I
the
must have
class.
to go to the bathroom.
How that works out, we don't
She
know.
just
But
went
that's the way we're
over
Behind the
starting.
bush, yeah. I'll probably be
Along
doing
the
that
same
too.
lines, Kim told me that he's set up
The only bad thing is
A3
what happens if you take
with
off.
some options for us. So if you want to take a look at that this morning, feel free to step in there. It's got some tables arranged like we might be able to use them. Got some chairs in lines like we might be able to use them. See what you think about the way that's set up for the this 8 o'clock series. Okay.
For November 14th, that means the Israel study will be at 8 o'clock.
For November 14th, that means the Israel study will be at 8 o'clock. Okay.
And the
Yes.
service after.
Mhm.
The other car leaving.
Yes, we will be recording it. And like I said, we may have to play with that some to see what works out best for everybody. And we want to have your input on it. Do you like it better arranged the way we're talking about? Do you like it better arranged another way? There are options. But right now, the main thing is anchoring it to.
Does this guy know
the-
something we don't?
Okay,
Where?
that's the main
This
thing.
guy here.
Okay.
He just
now
went
then,
over and
what
went to the bathroom.
We talked about, I got to go back there and do that now. If I can find the, is it over there? Yeah, there it is. Okay, we started out talking about Lydda, Joppa, and then we did Caesarea. Then we talked about Mount Carmel, and last week that's where we were. Today we're going to be talking about another place along the Jezreel Valley, which is Megiddo, and that everybody wants to know everything they can about Megiddo because, of course, Armageddon. Did y'all watch that movie, Bruce Almighty? Did you see the last scene where Bruce looks outside and he sees this homeless guy, which is Morgan Freeman, who plays God in the movie, right? And he's standing there going with a sign that goes, Armageddon out of here. I love that. Okay, anyway, so we're going to talk about that. But since that is a fortified city, since we're going to be talking about battles that took place in Jezreel, I thought it'd be good for us to talk about being soldiers. And so we're going to talk about, Am I a Soldier of the Cross, in our first song. a soldier of the cross, a follower of the Lamb. And shall I fear to own his cause, or blush
I guess
to
if we turn it off,
see
it'll come over the
his
iPhone. So I feel like if you want to
face?
shut the car off, we could. It'll come over
Must
the iPhone.
I
We'll
be
still be able to hear it.
carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease, while others fought to
Oh, I guess it
win
stays
the
on because
prize
we
and sail through bloody seas? Are there no foes for me to face? Must I not stem the flood? Is this vile world a friend
I
to
don't know.
grace,
Because
to
it's
help
a
me
class,
on
and this is what they
to
do when it's a class.
God?
Instead of just they have
Sure,
a
I
moment of
must
praise and worship.
fight
thought it was
if
just,
I would reign.
talk
Increase
about
my
Israel.
courage,
This is kind of the
Lord.
basketball
I'll
Israel.
bear the toil, endure the pain, supported by thy word. When that illustrious day shall rise, and all thine armies shine in robes of victory through the skies, be thine. Amen. All right, now then, we don't have much time for this today because we got to get to Armageddon. Okay, all right. So, but anyway, what did you get from the sermon today? It was a good sermon. What did you get from that? Keep your mind on him and you'll have perfect peace. Okay, all right. All righty. Pray and seek help. Okay, that's good. A lot of people, you know, we're too many of us are like John Wayne. We don't need no help, right? Okay, so yeah, okay. If you need help, ask for it. Okay, anybody else? Spectrum. Recognize we're all on a spectrum. Some people, and in fact, that spectrum varies not only from person to person, but from time to time, from situation to situation, doesn't it? Absolutely. Okay.
It was refreshing knowing that I was always brought up that the word of God, that your emotions can be troublesome, but I am one of those in that middle group that he was talking about. I feel things deeply, and I'm not ashamed of that. It may be a better father, a more sensitive father, and I matter to the heart. I'm the guy in the movie theater who's going to shed that tear first, and I'm that guy.
You mean you get salt in your eye too?
But it was so nice to know that God created me the way, and I do feel deeply. But at the same time, my upbringing is also true, that your emotions can be fickle and they can go up and down. But it's nice to know that it's okay to feel things deeply, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially when you're guided by the Holy Spirit.
Amen. All right. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to just tell you, okay, here are the things I got. You're not alone. You're not unspiritual. Jesus doesn't judge you. He empathizes with you. And then things to do about worry and anxiety. Don't downplay the spectrum of struggle. And do drop any sense of shame and pick up any help that's available. I really appreciated the fact that they pointed out the resources that are available here at Southwest to help people, whether it's physical needs or spiritual needs or psychological needs or medical needs or whatever it might be.
I don't know what we're in for, dear.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on into
happened.
the stuff that we're here for
He's
today,
the one that
Megiddo
happened.
and Jezreel Valley. Megiddo is about 15 miles east, and you may notice I may pronounce it Megiddo or Megiddo. I grew up with Megiddo, but really correct pronunciation is Megiddo.
Again.
Megiddo is about 15 miles east of the Mediterranean Sea. It's about 25 miles southwest of the Sea of Galilee. It's on the eastern western edge. I wrote eastern. That's not right. It's the western edge of the Jezreel Valley. If I wrote eastern on your book, change that. It's western. Sometimes you read through stuff and you go, whoa, that's not right. Did I say that? Yeah, I did. Okay. Anyway, it's called Tel Megiddo now, or Tel Megiddo. Now, when you see the word Tel, T-E-L or T-E-L-L, in connection with those places back in Israel, that's talking about a mound. And when we go there, you're going to see these mounds all over the
Let's
place.
see
There'll be a
where
big old
these people are
plain,
going.
and then there's still
Huh?
bump
Trying
out.
to see where these
And you
people
go,
are going.
what in the world
What
is that?
people,
That's
that are
where
backing up and-
literally
they're just
civilization
going
upon
back to the
civilization
overpass
on
and
top of
going
each other.
back
At
to
Megiddo,
what you call
they
it.
have so far unearthed 26 layers of civilization, going all the way back
There's a
to the
car on
late
the,
On the
early Bronze Age.
side.
yeah,
So
I don't, that's illegal.
really
You can't unless it's a
fascinating
cop.
to
Yeah,
see
it
this
wasn't.
place. And there's a reason that that was an important place. Now, this is a good time for me to mention to you. Their concept of history in Israel is different than our concept of history. To us, history flows from east to west, right? The old stuff is over on the eastern coast, the Atlantic coast. The new stuff is on the left coast, right? The Pacific coast. And so history for us moves across the continent. But remember, Israel is only about the size of New Jersey. And so history doesn't move from east to west. It moves from bottom to top. The oldest stuff is on the bottom. The newer stuff is built on top of it. And that's what these tells are. And you'll see tells where they've done excavations like Megiddo. You'll see tells where they haven't done excavations. And they just say, well, that's what's there, but they haven't dug into it to see what kind of stuff they can uncover. So we'll see a lot of that stuff. But they've got excavations that take it back as far as 4000 BC at Megiddo. All right. Now, last week we talked about Mount Carmel, and I mentioned that this is on the international highway called the Way of the Sea. You're going to hear me say the Way of the Sea a lot. And when we get to Capernaum, you're going to understand why I tell you the Way of the Sea. You're going, wait, Capernaum's not by the Mediterranean. Yeah, just hang in there. Okay, that'll be what we're on November 14th. There's your incentive to be here at 8 o'clock November 14th. Okay, anyway, people who came up the coast highway here, not PCH, the international highway that was called the Via Maris, if they're going to continue to go either to Phoenicia or if they're going to head over to Syria, they're going to have to cross the Carmel Range. That's a range right there. Remember, I told you that's a range. Okay, there we go. It's working. Okay, that's a mountain range right there, Mount Carmel. The same thing's true of Mount Gilboa. When you get down to Mount Gilboa down here, that's a range also. It's not just a peak. Okay, so anyway, people coming up would have to either come all the way up to the Jokneam Pass, where they pass under, just right under where Elijah had that contest with the prophets of Baal last week, or they have to cross at Megiddo. Most times they crossed at Megiddo because it's a more direct route and it's a more easily passable route. And that's the way that they would get into the Jezreel Valley so that they could go further. And you can see that right here in Megiddo, there's that place called Ophrah, and there is kind of like a hub. There are 7 ways into Megiddo, to the Jezreel Valley, and 7 ways out. And so it's kind of the intersection of everybody that's going anywhere in that part of the world. Each of those passes were governed by a city that was a fortified city. Megiddo was the most prominent of them. Now, here's Megiddo. Megiddo is the tell that you see there circled. That's Megiddo. The highway that we travel is going through Megiddo Pass, and that's following the same route that they followed in the ancient Near East. That's the same route. The highways is built right on top of it, of the Via Maris there. Now, we won't actually be going through the pass because we'll be coming from the Sea of Galilee to go to Megiddo. The Jezreel Valley is that big, flat, fertile valley there. And so, did you know the first battle in recorded history took place in the Jezreel Valley. Did you know that? First battle in recorded history. May 9th, 1457 BC. Now, how's that for being precise? I didn't tell you what time of day it started, okay? And it started when Thutmose III from Egypt was engaged in conquest and stretching the borders of
All
Egypt.
these people are headed back to
And
LA.
that's what was
Yeah.
going
It's
on there.
Sunday.
He
Las
was
Vegas,
known
oh,
as
yeah.
the Napoleon of Egypt. He was always taking territory. And he gave a list of 16 campaigns that he underwent in 20 years. And he's recorded to have captured 350 cities during that time, all the way over to the Euphrates, all the way down in Africa to Nubia. And all the records of his campaigns are found inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Amun-Ra in Luxor, Egypt. And that is the first example of a battle that we have described historically. Okay, so the first historical battle for which we have records is a battle that took place in the days of Thutmose III here in Megiddo area. In fact, at that point, Thutmose III said to his men before they launched into that camp, before they launched across Mount Carmel range there at Megiddo, he told his men, capturing Megiddo is like capturing 1,000 cities. That's what he said about it. Okay. So anyway, that's the Megiddo Pass into the Jezreel Valley from the southwest. Here's Megiddo looking now at this point, we're looking north. We're looking east, actually. Yeah, we're looking east. You see Megiddo right there. That's the tell right here in the foreground, right there. That's Megiddo. And you're looking toward Mount Carmel, which you can see down there, Jokneam right there, as a matter of fact. Anyway, so that's what you're looking at. The two main passes into the Jezreel Valley. I can tell you a whole lot about the excavations that have been done there, but you'd rather see them than hear about when they were done and all that kind of stuff. Okay, this is looking at Megiddo and the Jezreel Valley from the west. You can see Nazareth. You can see Mount Tabor. That's the part that's covered there that you can't read. Then there's the Hill of Moreh, and there's the Jezreel Valley, Megiddo in the foreground. This is from the northwest looking down at the mound, the tell. This is from the north looking at the same thing. It's pretty easily identifiable. You see this and you go, okay, that's Megiddo. Okay. This is an aerial from the southeast. And this is some things you'll see there. There are stables that date back to Solomon's age, stables that date back to Ahab. There's a water system that we'll hopefully get to walk through. We didn't get to walk through when I was there before. There's a couple of gates that are very interesting. There's some early Bronze Age temples. Bronze Age would be contemporary with Thutmose III's campaign. So it would be contemporary with Egypt. Incidentally, what people don't realize is most of us usually think that from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age was kind of a gradual transition. From the Bronze Age to the Iron Age was a gradual transition. Well, that's true of most of them, but not true of going from bronze to iron. The transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age worldwide took place in about 50 years. Keep that in mind when we get here a little further in the story. Okay, so there's what you'll see at Megiddo. Here's Megiddo from the northwest. This is looking down on, this is some of the gates. This is the gate we'll actually go in when we walk up this pathway. This pathway right here will lead us from the parking lot into the gate area, and that's where we'll enter the city, the tell of Megiddo. It's that gate dates to Solomon. There's a Bronze Age gate that's right in the same vicinity. There's the Bronze Gate. They would have these chambers in there so that people could sit there and kind of, watch the flow of traffic. Traffic cops, okay? Making sure nobody's, speeding or anything like that. Incidentally, there's the gates that date back to Solomon's reign, and there are a couple of palaces there. There's a northern palace. The northern palace is Solomonic palace. The southern palace is an Ahab palace. Solomonic palace, the northern palace there. This is what's called a casemate wall. You know what casemate is? Casemate is where they would build two walls in order to fortify the city. They build two walls, but they build the walls so that there was a spacer between them. And so you had rooms along the walls. You got it? Okay, rooms along the walls. Now that works out really well. People can live in the rooms. People can set up shops in the rooms and stuff like that. But if an enemy comes, what they do is they fill those rooms with all kinds of fill to fortify the wall. So it's kind of a structural strengthening there. This is the early Bronze Age temples from the north. And you can see Chalcolithic Temple right there. Chalcolithic is we normally think of Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. Well, Chalcolithic is from the Greek word for copper stone. And what has happened is during a period of time of transition, they started, and understand, the names of the ages have to do with the kind of technology that was being used to develop tools, weapons, things like that. Stone, copper. Well, they figured out that you can mix tin with copper and make something harder. That's bronze. And then they figured out you can make stuff with iron too that's even stronger than bronze. And so that's why you get that progression right there. Okay. But that Chalcolithic temple falls somewhere between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. Okay. This is the eastern end of the tell aerial from the west. This is a sacrificial altar. They've actually found animal remains there. So they know that's what this was, a sacrificial altar from the Bronze Age. And this is a sacrificial altar on the North Temple area in the Bronze Age. And this is what they do. They just dig stuff out and they uncover stuff and they go, oh, look what I found. This dates to Ahab. This is a pillared building. Ahab built a lot of structures that had a different kind of architecture than the ones that were before him. He made a lot of use of pillars in his buildings. And so this one dates back to Ahab. Don't know what it was, but it was something dated to him. This is a grain silo. This would hold enough. Let's see, I wrote down how much it held. There it is. It's 23 feet deep, 35 feet wide at the top, 23 feet wide at the bottom, has a capacity of about 12,770 bushels, which means that it could feed 300 horses for about half a year. So they had lots of horses there. That's why they had those stables that I showed you. And you see that there's a way to walk down into it. That area right there, you can walk into it. So they would walk in to get the grain to bring it out, you know. There was a lot of walking going on there. Uphill, downhill, all that kind of stuff. This is a building that is made, I don't know why I put this one in here. It's made of two different kinds of masonry. This is called Ashlar Masonry, which is dressed stone. When you see dressed stone, that's Ashlar Masonry. And then it's filled in with field stones between the ashlars. This is southern stables that date to Ahab's day. And this is stables that date to Solomon's day. You see the manger there? Okay, so that's what's going on there. And the water system. Water system's fascinating. How do you get water into a city? And how do you keep other people from using the water system to invade the city? You remember how we a while back we talked about David taking the city of David? Remember how he did it? They came in through the water shaft, right? Okay. Then, so what do you think the first thing David did when he captured the city? He blocked out the water shaft. Nobody's coming that way anymore, right? And so he blocked it off, brought it inside the gates of the city. Okay. Well, that's what you've got here. This is the water system. This is looking at it from outside of the city. What would have happened here is this would have been the early stages where they would have gone through this and they would have had it covered so enemies couldn't see them doing it. They just saw this covered area, people going in and coming out. And they didn't know what they were doing. They were coming into a tunnel that led to the spring where the water was. This is a view overhead from the water system. And here's kind of the way it lays out. So what they did first, in order to get water into the city, because the spring is outside of the city. And you know that if somebody's besieging you, all they got to do is block off the, if they besiege the city so you can't get to your water, what's going to happen? You're going to die or you're going to surrender, right? Okay. Same thing if they cut off your food supply, same thing there, right? Okay. So anyway, so they cut off the water supply. In order to avoid that from happening, what they did is first, they dug a shaft with stairs going down into it. Now the stairs we go down into are not the stairs they built. Okay. But they dug a shaft that goes with stairs down into it. And then, whoops, hang on. And then they dug a tunnel. It's about a 300-foot tunnel at the bottom over to the spring. And once they were able to access the spring from the tunnel, then they came in and blocked off the spring entrance from outside so people couldn't get in. Then what they did is they came back. The first time they did it, they didn't think about it. Second time they realized, the first time the tunnel was not angled. It was not angled retrograde. It was angled so that you were walking down to the spring. Well, what's the problem with that? You got to go all the way down there, get a bucket all the way out, right? So they went back in and they remodeled it and they tilted it so that the water from the spring would flow down to the bottom of the shaft, and then they could use buckets and pulleys and stuff like that to get the water out. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to see at Megiddo. There's the water shaft, the tunnel, the spring, and the modern exit if we're able to go down into it. And here's what it looks like on the inside. This goes back to the time of Ahab. It's 300 feet long, 10 feet high. Okay, so that's basically Megiddo. Now, I rushed through Megiddo because we need to talk about stuff around Megiddo. Okay. One of the members of the class, and I didn't get his permission to share who it was kind enough last week to give me a copy of this book. I have spent the whole week with it. This is the finest atlas I've ever seen. It is fabulous. Don't buy it on Amazon. They price it too dear on Amazon. The best price I have found for it is there on BiblePlaces.com, Bible Atlas by Schlegel. It is really, really incredibly good. The maps are all satellite imagery. So it's not like what we normally are used to about drawn maps. This is satellite imagery, so you can get a sense of what the terrain looks like. So if you're interested in that, by all means, get it. I have about, oh, you want that? Hang on a second. Some of you are going to take a picture of that. There you go. Normally, I don't tell people don't buy it on Amazon, but don't buy it. They think way too much of it on Amazon. Okay.
One more day.
Okay, sure. Okay. Everybody got it? Okay, all right. Now, this is another one of those videos. This is about 16 minutes long about the Jezreel Valley, and it is incredibly good. I debated whether to use it last week in connection with Mount Carmel or this week in connection with Megiddo. I decided to do it this because it fits with the whole Armageddon thing we're going to talk about.
Shalom, and welcome to the Satellite Bible Atlas, video number 6, map 1-4. The focus of map 1-4 is the Jezreel Valley and Lower Galilee. The general location of the terrain of map 1-4 is situated in the north-central area of the land of Israel. We described in video number 3 how the Jezreel Valley is a wide, flat plain between the central hill country to the south and mountainous Galilee to the north. This makes the Jezreel Valley a hub of international routes that crisscross Israel, a kind of grand central station. Before we take a closer look at the Jezreel Valley and the routes that come in and out of the valley from all directions, let's first see the regions that surround the Jezreel Valley. To the west is Mount Carmel, including the Shreilah, or foothills of Carmel. Northwest is the plain of Ashlar, which spreads out from the modern seaport city of Haifa on the slope of Mount Carmel to Akko, Ptolemais in the north. North of the Jezreel Valley is Lower Galilee, a series of east to west running mountain ranges that are bisected by wide plains. Note the town of Nazareth on the mountainous ridge just north of the Jezreel Valley. On the east, note eastern Lower Galilee, and to the southeast, Mount Gilboa. Between eastern Lower Galilee and Mount Gilboa is the wide Harod Valley, which serves as a route to and from the east. Finally, note the Jordan Rift Valley, including the Sea of Galilee and the lower Jordan River Plain. From a high spot on Mount Carmel, let's get a view of the Jezreel Valley from west to east. Note the agricultural productivity of the Jezreel Valley. The name Jezreel means God will plant. Looking across the valley, some 10 to 15 miles away, are the Nazareth Ridge, Mount Tabor, and the Hill of Moreh. Turning just a bit to the south, here's the Hill of Moreh, the Harod Valley, and Mount Gilboa. Now let's take a closer look at the routes and site locations associated with the Jezreel Valley. One Bible geographer called the Jezreel Valley a stage with entrances and exits that lead to and from other nations. The southwest entrance exit of the Jezreel Valley leads to the coastal plain and ultimately to Egypt. These gates are called the Mount Carmel passes. They follow valleys that pass through Mount Carmel. Where the passes enter the Jezreel Valley, one pass is guarded by the city of Megiddo, the other by Jokneam. Above Jokneam, on Mount Carmel, is the traditional location of Elijah's contest with the prophets of the Phoenician god Baal.
We're on Mount Carmel, where Elijah contested the prophets of Baal, showing that Baal was nothing and Yahweh was the true God.
Here is an aerial photograph of the Wounds of Megiddo, well situated to oversee activity in the Jezreel Valley. Most importantly, Megiddo supervised the important pass connecting the Jezreel Valley with the coastal plain. The modern highway runs through Megiddo Pass. Map 2.5 shows a campaign of Pharaoh Thutmose III. This pharaoh may be the one who caused Moses to flee to Midian. Thutmose III made multiple campaigns into Canaan in an effort to secure control of trade routes in the plains. On one of those campaigns, Thutmose boasted of attacking Megiddo via the narrow Megiddo Pass. Giving a pep talk to his troops, he declared, "Capturing Megiddo is like capturing 1,000 cities." The northwest gate of the Jezreel Valley is the Kishon Pass. All of the Jezreel Valley is drained by the Kishon River, which exits the valley along the foot of Mount Carmel to the northwest, ending at the Mediterranean Sea. The route follows the river along Mount Carmel to the plain of Ashlar. This Google Earth photo shows Mount Carmel and the Kishon Pass. The photo is oriented to the west. North is to the right. Here's the tip of the Jezreel Valley. Here's Mount Carmel and the Kishon Pass that connects the Jezreel Valley to the plain of Ashlar and the Mediterranean Sea. Also visible are the Jokneam Pass through Mount Carmel and Tel Jokneam, where the route joins the Jezreel Valley. As map 6.3 shows, the Israel-Phoenicia alliance in the days of Ahab and Jezebel utilized the Kishon Pass in the transfer of materials, culture, and religion between these two nations. The north gate to the Jezreel Valley is the Shinon Pass. The Shinon Pass uses the valley to join with an important east-west route that connects Akko with the Sea of Galilee. More remote in the hills above this region is the village of Nazareth, where Jesus grew up.
Right, this is Nazareth, the town where Jesus grew up. You're in Nazareth?
and this is the hometown of Jesus. And he was teaching here in the beginning of his Galilean ministry in the synagogue. And the reaction from the people there was so strong that they wanted to take him up to the brow of the hill.
In the same hilly region near Nazareth, only 2 miles away, is Gath Hepher, the hometown of the prophet Jonah. Also nearby is Sepphoris, an important Roman town, the regional capital of Galilee when Jesus was a youth. To the north, across the wide Bet-Netophah plain, is Chalcolithic, where the Jewish general and historian Josephus Flavius was captured by the Romans. And Canaan, where Jesus performed his first miracle.
Hi, we're here in the city of Sepphoris near Nazareth, and behind me across the valley is a ruin of the city of Cana where Jesus did his first miracle, turning water into wine.
Archaeological excavations of Canaan have exposed a late 1st century AD building, which is likely a synagogue, including space and pillar. The northeast gate exits the Jezreel Valley between the hill of Moreh and Mount Tabor. Therefore, we call this gate the Tabor Pass.
By now, we're at a ridge near Nazareth, and to my right, we can see Mount Tabor and also the valley of Jezreel, where Barak and Deborah fought a battle against Jabin and Sisera of Hatzor, and where the Lord gave them great victory. Also behind me is the Mount of Moreh, where a city known as Nain sits on the ridge. And that is where the Lord Jesus Christ raised a son of a poor widow from the dead.
The Tabor Pass is part of the great international route that connects with nations further north. Note the Wadi Arbel, where the route drops down to the plain of Gennesaret along the Sea of Galilee. This photo shows the Wadi Arbel region. The international route comes along the northwestern side of the Sea of Galilee, then north. On map 1.3, note the continuation of the great international route from the Jezreel Valley to the Sea of Galilee. The route climbs north to the city of Hatzor in the Hula Valley. The route continues north in the Hula Valley to the region around Dan, where it branches to Lebanon, or Damascus of Syria, and beyond to Mesopotamia. The east gate of the Jezreel Valley is the Harod Valley, connecting the cities of Jezreel and Beth Shan. The Jezreel Valley is shaped like an arrowhead. The Harod Valley is the shaft of the arrow, running along the north side of Mount Gilboa. On map 1.3, note how the gateway to the east, the Harod Valley, intersects with the important route in the Jordan Rift Valley at the city of Beth Shan. From here, there is access up into Gilead. One route intersects with the Trans-Jordan International Highway, or the way to Bashan, at the city of remote Gilead. Here is a beautiful aerial photograph from the Pictorial Library of Bible Lands collection. We're looking at Mount Gilboa and the Harod Valley from west to east. Here is the modern kibbutz and ancient Tel Jezreel. Mount Gilboa, the Harod Valley, the modern route in the Harod Valley, maneuvering past irrigation and fish ponds to Beth Shan. Here's a portion of the Rift Valley, and off to the east, the hills of Gilead. There are many biblical events that show the Harod Valley was an important route. As marked on map 4.6, the Lord chose 300 men in the days of Gideon at the Harod Spring, near the city of Jezreel at the base of Mount Gilboa. The Midianites were across the Harod Valley at the foot of the hill of Moreh. When Gideon blew the trumpet, the Midianites panicked and fled down the Harod Valley, crossed the Jordan River, and tried to escape further east through Gilead.
We are in the spring of Pharaoh, where the Lord chose 300 men in the days of Gideon to conquer the Midianites.
In Saul's final days, the Philistines encamped at Shunem near the hill of Moreh. They were in a position to not only compete for control of the important routes in the Jezreel Valley, but also to drive a wedge between Israelite northern and southern tribes. King Saul gathered his forces at Jezreel and then snuck around the Philistines to get counsel from the witch at Endor, to no avail. The next day, Saul was wounded, retreated, and died on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines found his body and hung it on the walls of Beth Shan.
We're at that shot. We're standing on a Roman.
It's the map, it's the Canaanite Israelite map where the Philistines dragged Saul's body and hung it up.
Ahab, the Baal worshiping king of Israel, killed Naboth of Jezreel and confiscated Naboth's land. Not long afterwards, Ahab convinced Jehoshaphat of Judah to go up to Ramoth Gilead to battle with the Arameans. Ahab was killed at Ramoth Gilead by a stray arrow. The heroic Valley to Gilead connection is illustrated by the wild chariot ride of Jehu, who was anointed to wipe out Baal worship in Israel.
We're at the city of Jezreel. Behind us is the heroic valley, and Jehu rode his chariot wildly up the valley and came here to the city, killing both the king of Judah and the king of Israel, and having Jezebel thrown out the window. That's it.
And finally, the southern gate of the Jezreel Valley, the Bible calls the Ascent of Ur. The continuation of this route is shown on map 1-3. It ascends into the hills of Samaria at Ibni, and just before Dotan splits. One branch toward the city of Samaria and the other toward Tirzah. The routes rejoin at Shem, where it continues south on the watershed route, the road of the patriarchs. So these are the gates in and out of the Jezreel Valley. The Mount Carmel passes to the coastal plain in Egypt. The Kishon pass to the plain of Ashlar in the Mediterranean Sea. The Shimron pass beyond the Nazareth Ridge. The Tabor pass, a continuation of the great international route to the northeast. The Heroic Valley route, the connections to the Jordan Rift Valley of Gilead, and the ascent of Gur into Samaria.
That's where they show you some outtakes of those kids talking. We don't have time for that, as entertaining as it is. Okay. Did anybody notice how many routes there are into and out of the Jezreel Valley? 7. What a coincidence.
Take it over.
You think there might be some significance to that?
You could. I
7
don't,
is one of
it's hard
those
to say.
numbers, and when it comes up in the Bible, it
late
means
now.
something, right? 7 is a
going about
number
as good
that
as the other one.
signifies God accomplishing what he set out to do. He sets out to do something, 7 says done. And it goes all the way back to creation, right? The reason we have 7-day weeks is because of creation, okay? So it's all God accomplishing what he sets out to do. And that's all through the Bible. And when you get to the book of Revelation, that's what 7 means. It's a figurative number. It's designed to tell you something more than how many fingers to use, okay? But 7 passes. There's the Megiddo Pass, the Jokneam Pass, the Kishon Pass, the Shimron Pass, the Tabor Pass, Harod Valley, and the Ascent of Gur, which I grew up learning it was the Dothan Pass, because it goes up from Dothan to Ibleam and into the Jezreel Valley. All right, so here's the Jezreel Valley. Now we're looking at, this is what Jezreel looks like from Megiddo. This is a panoramic view. You can see everything from the Nazareth Ridge. Whoops, hang on.
I think the
There you go.
Jezreel Valley is where the
Nazareth
Battle of
Ridge,
Armageddon is.
to the hill of Tabor, Mount Morah, and then all the way down to the Mount Gilboa range. Okay, and then all across that, we're looking 15 miles across
This is a good-
that area right there.
This is a good
Now,
sign. We got the cops.
Yeah.
What the word Jezreel means? Remember that? What does it mean? He said God will plant. It means God sows. And I think that's probably a better way for us to understand it, because what God sows may vary from time to time. He may at sometimes sow food, grain, things like that we all want, but he may at other times sow disaster, depending upon how people respond to him. And I think that's an important distinction there that we need to see in Jezreel. All right, so that's the Jezreel Valley from the Megiddo. There's northeast from Megiddo. You've got Mount Tabor and Mount Hill of Morah. The one that's not marked over here is the Nazareth Ridge. Then looking a little bit more south, east, you see the Hill of Morah, the Harod Valley, Mount Gilboa. All right, now then, like I said, the first battle of recorded history took place in the Valley of Jezreel. The Valley of Jezreel is also known as the Plain of Esdraelon, which is Greek for Jezreel. Okay, it's also known in the Bible as the Plain of Megiddo or Megiddo, Plain of Megiddo. And so when you get to that Har Megiddo in the book of Revelation, it's talking about a physical location in Israel, this valley right here, okay? So anyway, this is where Thutmose III, about 1450 BC, something like that came through. I gave you the exact date a while ago. I don't recall what it was, 1457, I think. Anyway, this is where he comes through and he tells his soldiers, capturing Megiddo is like capturing 1,000 cities, and he chases the Canaanites out. Now, I want you to think about this. The importance of Megiddo is not the tell, it's not the mountain. It's the stuff that goes on in the Jezreel Valley. That's the importance of Megiddo. So I want to talk about some stuff that happened in the Jezreel Valley and see if we can learn some lessons from it. And maybe it'll help us to understand that passage in Revelation 16. So here's what happens. Thutmose III comes in, whoops the Canaanites, chases them every which direction. And so the idolatrous Canaanites are defeated and chased out of the territory by the Egyptian king. Now, what's the problem with that? The idolatrous Canaanites being chased out by an idolatrous king, right? Do you ever see examples in the Bible of where God uses one ungodly nation to discipline another nation? Sure. Assyria, Babylon, right? I mean, the prophet said, you got to be kidding. You're going to use Assyria? They're worse than we ever thought about being. And God says, tough. You know, I expect better of you than I'm getting from you. And so that's what goes on. So sometimes you'll see one ungodly nation defeating another ungodly nation. So there's a lesson that I see in Thutmose III's campaign. In fact, sometimes you'll see him called Thutmoses. Thutmose is the general way I've heard him described. Thutmose III is contemporary with the time that Moses was exiled to Midian. Thutmose III was succeeded by Amenhotep II. His son was Thutmose IV, who would be contemporary with the Israelites entering into the Promised Land. So basically, they're wandering around in the period of Amenhotep II and the beginning of Thutmose IV. All right. Anyway, now the next time we come across something going on in the Jezreel Valley is in Judges 1 and 2. Now, do you remember in Judges, when the Israelites in the book of Joshua entered into the land, what were their marching orders? Get rid of the people, right? If you don't get rid of them, they're going to be a problem to you. Get rid of them. You know, just run them out. Okay. So here's what you read in Judges 2. Judges 1 gives you a list of the places they didn't conquer and tells you why they didn't. And these are excuses that they give. And so what they basically do is they conquer the hill country areas, but they don't conquer the fertile valleys. And so you see right there, you got Canaanites living there. You got Ammonites living down here and Amorites living down here. You got, so Canaanites, Amorites living all over the place, and the Israelites don't run them out. So here's what God says to them in Judges 2, verses 1 to 5. Now the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. You shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you've done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to the people of Israel, people lifted their voices and wept, and they called the name of that place Bochim, which means weeping, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. Now, is this the first time that Israel has known what God intended for them to do and decided not to do it? And then when God says, here's what's going to happen because you didn't do it. They say, oh, well, we're sorry. We'll do it now. Too late. Told you to, you didn't do it. Now here's the consequences. Okay, so what you got here? Well, think about what God has done for Israel up to this point. He brought them out of the most powerful nation in the world. He opened the water so they could walk across and then drowned an army. He's fed them and watered them in a desert for 40 years. Why? Because when he told them to enter at the end of 2 years, they didn't want to. Oh, we can't do that. Well, wait a minute. The same God who opened the Red Sea is the one telling you to do it, right? So they spend 40 years. Then they go into the promised land and Jericho falls and Ai falls and all these other cities fall. And then they look around, they say, well, these Canaanites, they got iron chariots. Remember I told you about the Iron Age? This is contemporary with the beginning of the Iron Age. And so iron chariots are a big deal. You don't need iron chariots in the mountains, right? Chariots don't do you much good on mountain roads. But down in the valley, chariots will do you a lot of good, right? Keep that in mind. So the Canaanites are occupying the Jezreel Valley. So lesson, failure to trust God has its consequences. God's already done these things for them, but they didn't trust him to deliver the Canaanites and the Amorites into their hands, even though he's done everything else so far. They've got blinders on about what God can do in the future. Okay? So I'm just giving you suggestions of lessons that I get from these things. Okay. Deborah and Barak. I grew up calling him Barak, but Barak is the correct pronunciation. Judges chapters 4 and 5. Sisera, the Canaanite, is occupying. He's really got the Israelites surrounded because he's occupying this territory right here in the Jezreel Valley, but his campaign headquarters is up north of the Sea of Galilee at a place called Hatzor. So he's brought his army down into the Jezreel Valley, and they're camped down near Ta'anak, along that eastern edge of the Mount Carmel range, the western edge of the valley. And so anyway, Barak is up on Mount Tabor with his army. And Deborah says, go whip him. And Barak says, only if you go with me. And she says, okay, I'll go. But that means that he'll be delivered into a woman's hand. And Barak thinks she's talking about herself. No, it's not. So anyway, he takes his men and they go down and they rout this hugely superior Canaanite force in the Jezreel Valley. Now, you got mountain fighters in a valley terrain fighting an enemy that's got tanks, iron chariots, right? What chance do the Israelites have to defeat the Canaanites on Canaanite turf when they got tanks? Nothing, right? They don't have a chance. So what does God do? The Bible doesn't really tell us except in the song of Deborah in Judges 4 and 5. The kings came, they fought the kings of Canaan at Ta'anak by the waters of Megiddo. They got no spoils of silver. From the heaven, the stars fought. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. March on, my soul, with might. Then loud beat the horse's hoofs with galloping of his steeds. What apparently happened is iron chariots don't do well in mud. So God floods the Jezreel Valley. God doesn't play fair. And so the Kishon River, just it overflows its banks. They're dealing with mud. They can't go anywhere. And so what happens is Sisera, the leader, takes off running. He runs around behind the Israelite forces to a place where he thinks he's found an ally, lady named Jael. Don't ever close your eyes around a duplicitous woman. You want some warm milk? Here, lay down, take a nap. You're nice and comfy. And then she finds a tent peg and a hammer, right? Okay, all right. So lesson. Here's the lesson I get from this. It doesn't matter how unfavorable the odds are. If God fights with you, you win. If God fights against you, you lose. It just doesn't matter. Now, I intended to mention this earlier, but I guess now is as good as, well, no, we're not there yet. We'll get to it in a minute. Okay, but this is a place where there have been more, historians say there have been more battles fought in the Jezreel Valley than any other place in the world. Okay? Now, so there's Mount Tabor where Barak was situated before the fight. There is Ta'anak where the fight took place, the Kishon River running through it, and that's where the Canaanites got bogged down with their iron chariots. Okay, now go to about 1180 BC and Judges 6. And now we got a guy named Gideon. Remember Gideon? Okay. And this is just summarizing. The Midianites are oppressing the Israelites. Gideon's a little bit reluctant to go against them. The Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now proclaim in the ears of the people, whoever is fearful, let him return home. Gideon starts with 32,000 men. And he says, if you don't want to be here, go home. 22,000 take him up on it. You know, every morning when I'm picking a jury, I always say, how many of you'd rather be somewhere else, you know? And if I let you all go, I wouldn't have any jurors to pick from. So Gideon now got 10,000 men. How many people do the Midianites have? I haven't found out. The Bible says they have more soldiers than the sands of the sea, and they got 900 chariots to boot. Okay? So the Lord said to Gideon, 10,000 people are still too many. Take them down to the water. So he brought the people down to the water. This is the Harod stream. So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every man to his home. So he brings them down to the brook. He says, I want to see all you take a drink. People who go like this, he says, go over there. People who lay down on their bellies, he says, go over there, right? Now, I've had people tell me all kinds of reasons why God chose one group over the other group. Situational awareness. No, it didn't matter which group was the smallest. God's going to take the smallest group, whatever it is. And it just happened to be the ones that laid on their belly and lapped water like a dog, who are incidentally not situationally aware. They're not what a soldier would want to be doing. So they're not very smart. Good. God can take dumb anytime. It reminds me of that story. Have y'all ever heard about that story about the mouse riding an elephant across a bridge? A mouse rides an elephant across the bridge, and at the end, the mouse says, boy, we made that bridge shake. That's what's going on here. God can take 300 men and beat an army that's bigger than we can imagine. Okay, here's the hill of Moreh from the west. Here's the Harod cave where the spring comes out. And here's some people playing like they're Gideon's soldiers. All right, go down a little bit further. Now we've got Saul, the King Saul, rejected by God. And I don't have time to read all of this to you, but you may remember that when Saul is fighting a superior force of Philistines, that Saul goes and tries to get counsel from the witch of Endor, the medium at Endor. She conjures up Samuel out of the dead. Let me tell you, the person in the room who was most surprised was that woman. She didn't expect to see Samuel, Anyway, so Samuel gets up, tells him, get back out there like a man and die like a man. And so he does. He goes, he's killed, he dies on Mount Gilboa. And then the Philistines take his army and his body, they cut the head off and take his body and hang it up on the hill at Bethshan, which is a place we'll visit. We'll visit Bethshan. It's right at the end of the Harod Valley. So there's the Harod Valley, Mount Gilboa, where Saul died, and Jezreel, which is this section. Do I have a? Yeah, right there. There's Tel Jezreel right there. The Harod Spring is marked out, and Mount Gilboa, where Saul died. So what's the lesson from that story? Hang on. That's not the one I wanted. I wanted this one. How about this? Faithlessness has its consequences. God told Saul back in 1 Samuel 15, no, 2 Samuel 15, to kill the Amalekites. Somebody check that out. Hang on, I'll check it out. No, it was 1 Samuel 15. It was 1 Samuel 15. He tells Saul to kill the Amalekites, wipe them out. Does he do it? No, he doesn't do it. Samuel comes along and says, hey, what gives? Saul says, I did what the Lord said. No, you didn't. I could hear the evidence, right? And so he tells Saul at the time, the Lord doesn't have as much pleasure in sacrifice as he does in obedience, right? Obeying is more important than sacrificing. And as a result, he says, God's going to deliver the kingdom from your hand to another man that's better than you. Well, when Saul is on Mount Gilboa and in the process, in the throes of death, there are two accounts of it. 1 Samuel 31 tells the official Jewish account of it. 2 Samuel 1 tells the account of a guy who came upon the scene. I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear. He saw me and called to me, and he said, who are you? I answered, I am an Amalekite. Who was it that Saul was supposed to have killed back in 1 Samuel 15? This guy wouldn't even be alive if Saul had done his job. Okay? So anyway, faithlessness has its consequences. And so God himself fought against Saul and used the consequences of Saul's own faithlessness to defeat him. All right. Now, this is the one we talked about last week, Mount Carmel. And the whole Elijah, Ahab, Omri issue, Jezebel issue, that whole thing, Did you notice that in the video, it talked about the fact that the Baal worship came from Phoenicia, and it came through the Kishon Pass, but it came into the Jezreel Valley. Jezreel Valley is where Ahab's base of operation was. This is where Ahab set up Baal temples. This is where Elijah takes on the 850 prophets of Baal just over the Jezreel Valley on Mount Carmel. In fact, when he kills the 850 prophets, he kills them in the valley at the Kishon River, right? Okay. Not only that, but this is where Ahab and Jezebel decide that they're going to take a vineyard that belongs to a nice guy named Naboth by having him killed. And they have a kangaroo court and get him killed. This is where Ahab calls on false prophets to convince Jehoshaphat to go with him against Ramoth Gilead. Remember Micaiah? Ahab has all these prophets saying, oh yeah, go defeat Ramoth Gilead. And they call Micaiah. And he says, I hate Micaiah. He never says anything good to me. Micaiah comes in and says, oh, go defeat Ramoth Gilead. He says, I've told you before, don't lie to me. Okay, then I'll tell you what. The Lord has decided to make all your prophets lie to you because he plans to kill you. So Ahab changes clothes, dresses like a common soldier, has Jehoshaphat wearing his royal robes, says, Jehoshaphat, you lead the fight. Jehoshaphat takes off. The archers over at Ramoth Gilead see the guy coming in king's robes. They think it's Ahab. Then they figure out who it is. And so one of them goes, oh, and he just lets his arrow go. It kills Ahab. Stray arrow. Elijah had told Ahab that the place where the dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, the dogs will lick up your blood. And guess what? That's what happened. He told Jezebel, the dogs are going to eat Jezebel's flesh. And guess what happened? Now, here's the message to me on this one. Elijah is one man. He stands against 850 prophets. And we're not going to get to Armageddon, are we? Okay. He stands against 850 prophets. One man plus God is the majority, right? Okay. All right. Next time you see it, there's Tel Jezreel, Mount Gilboa. The next time you see it in the Old Testament is when Josiah goes up to fight Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho is on the way to fight with the Assyrians against the Babylonians who are trying to overcome the Assyrians. He's on his way. Josiah wants to interfere because he wants the Babylonians to win. Well, the Babylonians are going to win, but they're going to win without Josiah's help. Josiah at Megiddo faces down Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho says, I'm on a mission from God. He's driving that big old Oldsmobile wearing the sunglasses. And Josiah doesn't believe him. He goes fighting against God. He doesn't intend to fight against God, but that's what he does. And he gets killed. And Necho heads on up. He's too late to join the battle at Carchemish. The Babylonians win. Necho is mad. He comes back down and does a whole lot of damage in Israel. The revival that Josiah started comes to an end. So here's my lesson from that. Who am I to think that I can step in and help God out? If God wants the Babylonians to win, he's perfectly capable of doing that without my interference. I don't have to get involved in every political or socioeconomic issue that comes up. I don't have to. I just got to be faithful. God can take care of it without me. Okay? All right. You read about this in Zechariah 12:10 through 13:1. I'll pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and plea for mercy. So when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, where do you read that? They will look on him whom they have pierced. You read that in the Gospel of John at the time of the crucifixion. You read it in the book of Revelation about Jesus. So we're talking about Jesus here. And they'll weep over me like the mourning for Hadad Ramon in the plain of Megiddo. That's referring to the mourning for Josiah after his death. And then you read on that day, there shall be a fountain open for the house of David. Let me tell you what I think this is about. I think this is about Pentecost. I think this is about Pentecost. When the people realize they have killed the Messiah, they go, oh my, what can we do? And Peter tells them, and 3,000 are responsive to the message, and the doors are opened for grace. I think this is a poetic description of Pentecost right there. Okay. Now, the only other place in the Bible where you read about Armageddon is this. And this is Euphrates dries up, enemies of God, which are depicted as, a dragon and frogs and a beast and unclean, a false prophet and all that kind of stuff. They come across the Euphrates, and when they come across, they're in the valley of Megiddo. No, they're not. The Euphrates is 300 miles from Megiddo at the closest. Okay, so it can't be that. So what do I think is going on here? I think the book of Revelation is entirely written in figurative language. I think that every one of the images, including Megiddo, is a figurative image. I really wish I had time to do that. Let me tell you this very briefly. I'm just going to tell you this real quickly. In fact, let me just go right through my slides. Well, we'll do it this way. Chapter 16, you've got the bad guys lined up in the Jezreel Valley at the place called Megiddo. Okay. You don't see the other army till you get to chapter 19. Then you've got a guy riding a white horse leading a big old army. All the army's wearing white uniforms. The only one with blood on him is the general. What army have you ever known of where the general does the killing? I want to be in that army. Okay. And so he comes, and then the next thing you see happen is the birds of the air are told to come gorge themselves on the bodies of the slain in the valley. You don't see a battle of Armageddon in the Bible. You don't. There is no battle of Armageddon. They line up, the other army shows up, the birds are told, hey, come fill up on these dead bodies. That's the story. Okay. So what's the point? The point is, I think, And there's a whole lot more I could say about that. I've got several things here that I wanted to go into, but we just don't have time to. Nobody knows when the world's going to end. Ever since the 16th century, people have been saying, it's about to happen, it's about to happen, you know. At 16th century, Martin Luther, John Calvin, 17th century, Isaac Newton, Matthew Henry, 18th century, Charles Wesley, 19th century, William Miller put a date to it. The world's going to end on October 22nd, 1844. Albert Barnes, John Nelson Darby, C.I. Schofield, last century, Harold Camping. He missed it on September 6, 1994. 16 years later, he tries again, misses it again. May 21st, 2011. Then he says, oops, I was wrong. It's October 21st, 2011. Last I checked, they're still standing. Hal Lindsey said it's going to come within 40 years of 1948, which is when Israel, the nation of Israel, was reconstituted. I think we're past that. Then he says in another book, the decade of the 1980s could very well be the last decade of history as we know it. Then he says Christians should not be planning to still be on earth by the year 2000. And in late 1991, oh, this was terrible. He says the Soviet Union is going to invade Israel, and that's going to precipitate Armageddon, and it's all about to happen. The book came out in December 1991. Anybody remember what happened on Christmas Day, 1991? The Soviet Union collapsed within a month after his book came out. How many times do people have to get it wrong before we figure out? This is a picture. This is a picture language. It's not something we're supposed to be taking, literally. It's picture language, okay? So here's my message. Don't sweat Armageddon. Just be sure you're in the right army. Okay? So that's Megiddo and the Jezreel Valley. Next week, we'll talk about Nazareth. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.